Here, read this.
Woof.
Good evening. It's December the 4th, 2025, and here is your poem for the day, continuing the streak of poems with Merlin in the title. To quote Father Christmas, I'm going for the blooming record. This poem is called Merlin Enthralled, and it's written by Richard Wilbur. It was published by The New Yorker, and it was also collected in Wilbur's Pulitzer Prize-winning book from 1956, Things of This World. As usual, I will read through the poem in one, and then we'll talk a little bit about it afterwards. So here we go. Merlin Enthralled by Richard Wilbur. In a while they rose and went out aimlessly riding, leaving their drained cups on the table round. Merlin, Merlin, their hearts cried, where are you hiding? In all the world was no unnatural sound. Mystery spied them riding glade by glade. They saw it darkle from under leafy brows. But leaves were all its voice, and squirrels made an empty fracas in the ancient boughs. Once by a lake edge, something made them stop. Yet what they found was the thumping of a frog, bugs skating on the shut water top, some hairlike algae bleaching on a log. Gawen thought for a moment that he heard a whitethorn breathe Niniane. That Siren's daughter rose in a fort of dreams and spoke the word, sleep, her voice like dark, diving water. And Merlin slept, who had imagined her, of water sounds and the black unsoundable swell, a creature to bewitch a sorcerer, and lay there now within her towering spell. Slowly the shapes of searching men and horses escaped him as he dreamt on that high bed. History died, he gathered in its forces, the mists of time condensed in the still head, until his mind, as clear as mountain water, went ravelling toward the deep transparent dream who bade him sleep, and then the Siren's daughter received him as the sea receives a stream. Fate would be fated, dreams desire to sleep, this the Forsaken cannot understand. Arthur upon the road began to weep, and said to Gawen, remember when this hand once hailed a sword from stone, now no less strong, it cannot dream of such a thing to do. Their mail grew quainter as they clopped along, the sky became a still and woven blue. Lovely poem, that. I really like the darkle, the use of that word darkle, the leaves darkling under their brows. Pleasure to read. And it's an interesting complement to yesterday's poem, which was Merlin by Edwin Muir, which begins, O Merlin, in your crystal cave, deep in the diamond of the day. Here, Merlin is also asleep. It seems that he is trapped by Niniane, who is sometimes operates under the word Nimue, the Lady of the Lake. But here he seems willingly or at least peaceably trapped by the enchantress. Only the Forsaken cannot understand why this is so, the Forsaken being the knights who tramp out from the Table Round. Merlin himself seems to have reached a higher plane, and as in Muir's poem, the arrest of Merlin is compared to an arrestment of time. As Merlin dreams, history died, he gathered in its forces. The mists of time condensed in the still head, until his mind as clear as mountain water went ravelling toward the deep transparent dream who made him sleep. And then the Siren's daughter received him as the sea receives a stream. In Arthurian stories, Merlin is sometimes trapped by Niniane or Nimue in a tree, a bit like Ariel is trapped in a tree by Sycorax in The Tempest, or in a crystal cave, as we see in Muir's poem. Here it isn't clear where Merlin is physically sleeping, only in an abstract sense on the high bed of Niniane's towering spell. But given that Nimue is the Lady of the Lake, I think it's interesting that when the knights reach the lake edge, they have something that makes them stop, and what they see are almost like clues of something that happened, as if the thumping of a frog might be disguising the thumping of Merlin's heart. Bugs skating on the shut water top makes it sound like the lake is something that has closed over the top of Merlin. And some hair-like algae bleaching on a log sounds a little bit like the remains of someone who has been drowned. In Muir's poem, Merlin was called upon by a speaker who wished to undo the biblical fall, reverse time, and hang the apple back on the tree of knowledge. We spoke about Muir wishing to live in the ever-long day of the imagination, the static condition of art, instead of temporal life. That wish is not so explicit here, but it's interesting to note that the disappearance of Merlin coincides with the world seeming to become, to borrow a plathism, merely actual. Without the magician, the knights are confronted by a world in which they can hear no unnatural sound. Mystery spied them riding glade by glade. They saw it darkle from under leafy brows. But leaves were all its voice, and squirrels made an empty fracas in the ancient boughs. So there is no mystery anymore. The sounds that make them stop have mundane explanations. The knights are like Adam and Eve taking their first steps out of Eden. Even as they live, their exploits are falling into legend. Arthur upon the road began to weep and said to Gawen, "Remember when this hand once hailed a sword from stone, now no less strong. It cannot dream of such a thing to do." Their mail became quainter as they clopped along. The sky became a still and woven blue. I think quainter is marvellous. It's as if with the dream brutally ending their high times at Camelot, they are suddenly self-conscious of looking ridiculous in their armour, like Renaissance fair knights on the subway home or something. And then there's that final hint of the sorceress and her handiwork in the last line, Niniane, the spinner of spells, leaving them with a sky that is as still and woven blue.